When searching for the parents of my second great grandfather, I thought that I would find a family household. Instead, I found a pattern that raised more questions than answers. I found several children with my second great grandfather's surname living and working as servants among prominent families in New Brunswick, Canada. However, I could not find their parents among the records. This pattern seemed to suggest that these children might be siblings from a disrupted or fractured family system. That became my working hypothesis. And so I began my research to find proof. Hi, I'm Janine. Welcome to Janine-E-ology. I started the search for my second great grandfather's parents in the 1851 census. It was here that I found a 15-year-old Thomas H. living and working as a servant for James Pennington, the shipbuilder, in Kingston, Kings County, New Brunswick, Canada. I thought this might be my second great-grandfather, but I didn't really think much of the document until a pattern started to emerge. Another child servant with the H surname soon appeared. This time it was a 10-year-old girl named Margaret. Later, two more children with the same surname appeared in a similar situation. They had no clear family household and were working as servants for prominent New Brunswick families. This was something I couldn't ignore. Although I still couldn't confidently identify their parents in the records, I started to seriously consider that maybe they were truly related. Because I found Margaret first, I decided to research her further. My research then led me to family trees that recorded Margaret H. as married to Daniel M. I found them in the 1871 census. I noted it at the time, but I did not see how it connected to the larger pattern I was uncovering. The connection didn't really start to click until I came across the DNA match. This match caught my attention because she lived in New Brunswick, Canada. When I reviewed her family tree, I found Daniel M. among her ancestors, a detail that immediately stood out because I had already connected him to Margaret H. However, in the DNA matches tree, the children were linked to a different wife, Martha, instead of Margaret. That contradiction made me stop and investigate further. I then returned to the records and identified Mary Jane, Daniel M.'s daughter, as the link to my DNA match. In the matches tree, she was simply listed as Jane, but I found her in the 1881 Canadian Census listed as Mary at just 1 year of age. Although the record contains several major spelling errors, the household clearly includes Mary Jane along with variants of the family names. Most importantly, it identifies Margaret H. as her mother, a detail that became central to the investigation. In the 1891 census, Mary Jane appears again at age 10, and she is still associated with Margaret H. Mary Jane's death certificate also identifies Margaret H. as her mother. By 1900, it appears that Margaret had passed away, as I found Daniel M. listed as a widower and married to Martha P. In the 1901 Canadian Census, we see a 20-year-old Mary Jane living with Daniel and his wife Martha. So why does all this matter? Well, Mary Jane was appearing in the census records with Daniel and a Margaret way before Daniel ever married Martha. That means that the DNA matches tree with Martha as Mary Jane's mother does not fit the historical timeline documented in the records. The evidence strongly suggests Margaret H. was Mary Jane's biological mother, not Martha. I cannot yet prove with certainty that Margaret H. is the 10-year-old servant girl I found in the 1851 census. Even so, the timeline and the locations make that possibility very compelling. As I continued reviewing DNA matches, I found 3 additional connections to the descendants of the M family, including another person who lives in New Brunswick. These matches do not stand alone. Together, they connect to my direct line, to the lines of Thomas H.'s other children, and to the shared match whose tree includes Mary Jane and Daniel. My sister and I both share that match, and she has additional connections within the broader cluster. So no single record or DNA match proves this relationship on its own. Taken together, however, the evidence suggests Margaret H. forms a consistent pattern that supports my working hypothesis. H servant children are likely siblings from a disrupted family. Margaret is simply the first servant child whom the records and DNA evidence seem to connect to my second great-grandfather. I didn't find the other H children in that 1851 census. I found them later in the 1861 records. It's possible they were too young to be working as servants in 1851, or their surname may have been misspelled in the records. At this stage, I do not have enough evidence to confirm or draw firm conclusions about them. Even so, some evidence does suggest that they may be the younger siblings of my second great-grandfather, Thomas H., and Margaret H., the 10-year-old servant girl. I plan to explore that possibility further in a future video. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and as always, have a great day.